Hey guys, I'm Julian. I'm a native Korean speaker, and I'm the person who is going to teach you Korean in this channel and guide you through your journey of learning Korean. But before we start, let's briefly talk about the characteristics of Korean. It might be too obvious for some people who are already used to Korean language, who already speak Korean, but we need to start from obvious things to get things clear. So first of all, what is Korean? Korean is a language spoken mainly by people who live in South Korea, North Korea, and overseas Koreans. The total number of native Korean speakers are more than 80 millions. There are more than 2 million speakers in China, 1 million in the United States, and half a million in Japan. And why are there so many Korean speakers in China and Japan? There are historical reasons for that. We're going to talk about it next time if we have a chance to mention it in another video. Contrary to the belief that Korean is similar to Chinese and Japanese, Korean is very different from those two East Asian countries. It might be true that Japanese would be the closest language. Japanese and Korean share some similar characteristics. They are honorific languages and use words derived from Chinese characters. Also, a large portion of Korean words were originated from Chinese. But all of three languages are substantially different, and people live in one of those three East Asian countries can't understand each other unless they spend a great amount of time in studying each other's language. In fact, Korean is considered to be a language isolate or one of the Koreanic languages that includes Korean and Jeju language. You might have heard of Jeju Island in Korea. For Koreans living in the mainland, it is very hard to understand what people in Jeju Island say. So some linguists try to differentiate Jeju language from Korean and make a new family called Koreanic language. But as of now, it is not a mainstream argument. Also, previously, Korean language was considered to be Altai language. That's what I learned when I was in school. But since then, the idea has been rejected. So you don't need to worry about if you need to learn any other languages to make Korean learning easy. I just mentioned that Koreans are mostly spoken by people living in South Korea, North Korea, and overseas Koreans. And there's no good statistics revealing how many people out there are learning Korean as a second language. It's unfortunate, right? It's obviously not a world's mainstream language to expand your audience. You would have probably decided to learn Korean because of your interest in Korea or Korean culture, right? But you might be still curious about the popularity of Korean language. Since the late 2000s, the popularity of Korean language has been significantly rising. You can also check it out on Google Trends. Don't forget to set the location to be worldwide, and set the period starting from 2004. Another good indicator that shows the rise of Korean language would be the number of TOPIK applicants. TOPIK stands for Test of Proficiency in Korean. According to the National Academy of the Korean Language, for the past 3 years, the TOPIK applicants have increased by 15% per year in average, and the accumulated number of TOPIK applicants are now approaching to 3 million. This will be more than your expectation. And now, you are joining for the trend and for the future. Sounds great. But the bad news for you here, Korean is a very difficult language to learn. According to the United States Defense Language Institute, Korean is classified as a super hard language along with Chinese, Japanese, and Arabic. Korean has its own characters, Hangul. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. Hangul makes reading and writing really easy. Let's briefly see how Hangul looks like. Hangul characters are divided by syllables. Let's say this English word, New York. And London. New York. London. Can you see? And the way you read these characters are always the same. It's always new. It's always York. It's always Lon. It's always done. There's no other way to read this. It simplifies the reading process, and you don't need to consider exceptions. You'll find it very easy to pick up Hangul, Korean alphabet. We're going to start to learn Hangul from the next lesson. So, despite the easiness of Hangul, why is Korean difficult to learn? First of all, the sentence order is different. Let's see the simple sentence. Let's say this sentence. I am going to London. In Korean, the sentence order is literally like I am London going to. It's gonna be in Korean. 나는 런던에 간다. So, I am is here. Going goes here. Going to goes here. And London goes here. The sentence order is different. Let's see another example. See this next sentence. I met my friend at McDonald's. I met my friend at McDonald's. In Korean, the sentence order is literally like I at McDonald's. My friend met. So I goes here. Met goes to the end, and my friend at McDonald's. I at McDonald's. My friend met. 나는 맥도날드에서 친구를 만났다. I'm gonna skip writing in Korean because it's just to show this sentence example. It's confusing, right? But as time goes on, you're gonna adapt to this different sentence order. Next, Korean is an honorific language. Basically, you can tell that each Korean sentence is an informal form or a formal form. But not only that, the cultural content that you have to learn properly to use formal languages can be confusing for foreigners. So, because I understand how confusing it might be for foreigners, I'm gonna make videos about Korean cultural context when we learn about the formal and informal languages. Next, the expressions students learn from textbooks are different from expressions Koreans actually use in their everyday life. Of course, most languages are different when it is used in a written form and the spoken form. But in Korean, it is almost always different unless you are writing to chat with your friends. And most Korean classes don't address those differences because it is hard to do when you are a beginner. It will greatly increase the complexity of classes. I'm not gonna cover that in the beginning either, but I will eventually cover them to help you use your Korean in the practical conversational settings. So stay tuned. There are not only factors that would make Korean learning difficult, there are also factors that will make learning Korean easy. And one of those factors is that Korean has its own alphabet, Hangul. It is a very scientific alphabet created by King Sejong and his scholars. You'll find it very easy to learn Hangul and may be surprised how it makes a lot of sense. Many Korean learners say, although Korean is difficult, Hangul is easy. Please note that the Korean language and Hangul are different. The Korean language is a language itself, the broader category, and Hangul represents its alphabet and the reading and writing system. So don't be confused about the difference. Another factor that makes Korean language easy is that there's no grammatical gender. Many languages like Arabic, Spanish, they have grammatical genders and you have to memorize them. It is easy when the gender is so obvious, such as such as Nobio or Nobia. Nobio is boyfriend and Nobia is girlfriend. Boyfriend is obviously a male and girlfriend is obviously a female. But how about this? Persona. We put la here. La persona, because it is feminine. Los Estados Unidos. The United States. The states are masculine. States, United States, and they are plural. So we use los here. But in Korean, it is very rare that you have to care about those singular and plural. There are some rare cases that you have to care about it, like a person and people. But in most cases, you don't need to care about it, and it makes it easier to learn Korean. Lastly, Korean often omits the subject. In English, there has to be always I, you, we, they, and so on, even in very simple sentences. But in Korean, you use the subjects only when it is really necessary to emphasize that subject. Imagine that 3 people are ordering food from a delivery restaurant. One person said, "What do you want to order?" Another person might respond, "Want pasta." In the Korean sentence order, it would be pasta, to eat, want. And the last person may say, I want a cheese pizza. And the Korean sentence order, I, pizza. I want to eat cheese pizza, then it's going to be I, pizza, to eat, want. So why is there I here? It is because the last person wanted to emphasize that they are the very one who wants the pizza different than the other two. So in Korean, you only need subjects when you need to emphasize or clarify the subjects. And in most other cases, you don't need it. Like, I want to eat pizza. You only need I when you want to emphasize that you are that person who want to eat the pizza. Does that make sense? We're gonna learn it. So, in this video, we talked about the characteristics of the Korean language. What do you think? Although there may be some difficulties that you might encounter and hinder you from learning Korean, throughout the lessons in this channel, I will try my best to help you learn Korean, and you'll see your Korean improves if you keep following my lessons. If you like this video and would like to learn Korean more from me, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification so that you don't miss any lessons. Thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned.